guys, I'm Nikki, and today I want to talk with you guys a little bit about the spiritual police. So if you've been around in this community for a while, I'm sure you've seen them or maybe even had a challenging experience that has stuck with you. If you're new here and you're not sure who the spiritual police are, let's take a minute and define it for everybody really quickly. So these are individuals within the spiritual community who believe it is their job to go around and tell everyone what they're doing right or what they're doing wrong in their practice. Now, this advice is typically unsolicited, and in my experience, it's not always correct. So while I agree that advice or guidance can truly be helpful in areas where people are struggling or need a little extra help, these particular individuals we're talking about on the spiritual police force are really trying to impose their own views, guidelines, or ideas on other people. And this may be happening for them on a conscious or subconscious level. Like, some people know they're doing it and some people really aren't aware. But either way, being on the receiving end of this behavior can be really upsetting. So it can create really minor issues, like kind of just shaking your confidence or maybe even questioning your beliefs or what you believe, even though you know that's what it is. Someone also might feel really embarrassed or singled out, especially as some of these policing issues are kind of done like in public or online in front of other people. And in the worst case scenario, it can really just leave you feeling like attacked or judged, which never feels good. If you're encountering individuals like this, I feel like the most important step is to first understand why this is happening. Especially because most people's initial reaction to being policed like this is very upsetting, and sometimes they even tend to go like kind of on the defensive and on kind of attack mode, right? Which never leads to anything good. So I'm really a big believer that once you understand why people are behaving in certain ways, it's so much easier to see what part is your responsibility and what part isn't, because sometimes it's really not about you, right? So this can also really kind of help you move past situations easier. Especially when other people are kind of just throwing like their lack of healing into your space. So I'm going to talk about different ways and different reasons why this is happening. And then after that, I think I might break down in another video some stuff that you can kind of do about it, because this is just like a lot of information. I don't want to overload you guys. So let's talk a little bit about why this might be happening. So the first reason is that somebody might be policing you is due to their insecurities or just a need for validation, right? So they might feel uncertain about their own beliefs, which leads them to sort of impose their ideas on others. And the thought process behind this is that if they can convince others to follow their spiritual path, they're going to be reassured in their own beliefs, right? They're going to be reassured that they're legitimate or correct, sort of like an external form of validation. And this tactic can also alleviate some of the discomfort that comes with these people's uncertainty, right? And a lot of people will really do anything to avoid sitting in difficult or uncomfortable situations, right? It's never fun. And sometimes if there's an out, people will take it. And this is one of the ways that happens. So the second reason people become spiritual police is because they lack open-mindedness. I feel like this is an issue with a lot of newbies that are kind of just finding their foothold in the spiritual community. One of the things is that the Muggle world really has a lot of rules, restraints, expectations, laws, guidelines, just different things that they're used to having to follow as like a guide or a roadmap of how to navigate their life properly. However, spirituality is a very open-minded space, at least if you're doing it right, I feel like, anyway. And this can be a very difficult kind of like pattern or mindset to free yourself from if you're not used to it. So what you'll see is people attacking others because they're just having a hard time accepting that spiritual paths are very diverse. And instead of looking at this and working through it, they kind of push their agenda forward as the only valid one. Another thing you might see is control issues. So control issues are another reason somebody might be policing your spiritual practice. And I think to a certain degree, many of us like to think we have control over, things in our life because it helps us feel safe and secure. And that's a normal reaction, right? We all want to kind of feel safe within the space we're moving in. But when the control issues step kind of into the negative aspect of the shadow, this control morphs into a desire to attack others' beliefs and practices to kind of find a sense of power over what's happening. In my experience, these are the individuals who are the most difficult to deal with and are typically the most outwardly aggressive. So let's talk about reason number 4. So people might have a problem minding their own business because they have a very big fear of change. And because of this, you'll see them resisting different perspectives because those viewpoints are really just challenging their current belief system and they're having a difficult time processing that. Now, I can really sympathize with this aspect because it's difficult to realize things weren't what you thought they were. And that can feel overwhelming and confusing and sometimes even a little bit scary, right? Like the mind bend is real. Another reason people might be spiritual policing is because they desperately need an ego boost. Now, you'll recognize this when you see people using their spiritual knowledge as a way to try and elevate their status in the eyes of other people. Or they might, kind of just be making themselves feel like they're important or special because of what they know. Now, I've seen this one quite a few times myself, and the irony is that most people who are doing this have maybe read a few books, watched a few online videos, or taken just a small handful of classes. And based off a limited amount of knowledge, they think they know what they're talking about. But to somebody who's more seasoned, it's very clear that they're just sort of like pretending to know more than they do. And while it can be extremely off-putting to experience, I'm always just internally a little embarrassed for them because I'm not quite sure they understand how they're actually coming across to other people. Now, I've experienced this personally quite a few times. A lot of times it happens in some of the classes I've taught. People will come in and while we're all kind of just introducing ourselves, they do that with this long list of like classes, courses, degrees, qualifications, or like titles that they have. And they present themselves in such a way to make themselves like try to look smarter than me. Now, if you're not prepared, this can be a little discombobulating. But the first question that always comes to my mind is, if you know all of this, what are you doing here? What is it you think that I can do for you if you're already like so much smarter and you know the material? But when you look at it through a different lens, it's a little easier to see what's actually going on. So, the truth is, I think that everyone has something valuable to offer, right? Whether you're new or whether you've been in the community for a while. It's just really about how you decide to present that information. So number 6, another reason, one of the most obvious ones, people might kind of be up in your spiritual business, is that they have a lot of unresolved trauma. Now, what that means is that their past experiences are actually like influencing them and causing them to like impose their beliefs onto others, sort of as a coping mechanism. Now, unfortunately, trauma can be very nuanced and really complex. And when you don't deal with it or make an effort to heal what you can, this is one of the ways it can really manifest negatively in your shadow. So I find that this often presents as spiritual bypassing many times. Instead of these individuals working on themselves, they tend to use spirituality just like a band-aid, right, to cover up all the trauma. And they come in here hoping that it will just solve all of their problems. Now, I can totally see the logic of this in a body and a mind that's just filled with trauma because it seems so much easier than having to deal with unpleasant, scary, uncomfortable, terrifying experiences from your past, right? Like nobody wants to go in and like relive all that in order to heal it. It's a lot. All that I would probably say here is that if you're experiencing this in any way, I highly encourage you to find a therapist that you feel like can kind of help you work through things, because spiritual bypassing to avoid dealing with your personal issues doesn't really seem to work for anybody. And if we're being honest about it, it usually causes more unintentional harm to other people in the process of your sort of, dysfunction and your lack of healing that you really genuinely need and deserve. So number 7, moving on, is the last reason people might be joining the spiritual police force is because of a lot of misguided zeal. So sometimes people just get really excited once they like kind of get in here and see how just really like helpful and beautiful and amazing spirituality can be, right? What a compliment it can actually be to your life. So unfortunately, this is like another area where like excitement and positivity can transition into the negative or the shadow aspect if you're really not careful with it. People may become over enthusiastic in their quest to sort of like save others. because they really genuinely think their path is the only right one. And I think this can also overlap into kind of the closed-minded category we discussed earlier. And I also think that several of the topics we've kind of gone over can all kind of merge in different ways into some of the other spaces that we've talked about as well. I really think it's important to try to create more understanding by addressing the root causes of spiritual policing, especially because it can help us all foster a more supportive spiritual community. So that way, instead of getting in an argument or feeling attacked or insulted, we can understand that people are really struggling in ways that we might not have thought about. So the next thing that I think is really good to address here is, what the heck do we do about all of this? Most of the time we can kind of like brush it off or walk away, but sometimes these experiences really negatively impact us or stay with us for a while and make us feel, just uncomfortable. So what I want to do is really talk about this in another video so we can kind of break it down so it's not all this one big piece coming at you like all at the same time. And hopefully that'll help give you some tools if you feel stressed out or this is a situation that you've kind of been encountering recently. So I hope that was really helpful. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, give it a little thumbs up and feel free to subscribe to my channel for more like-minded content. But in the meantime, I just want to thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope that you have an absolutely beautiful day.